I am so happy to be interviewing Stuart Knechtle. I said it right, correct?
Nailed it.
So happy to have you on the show today. You're calling in from Connecticut, I assume.
You got it, Jacob. Thanks so much for having me on.
So take me through a little bit. Obviously, you grew up in a Christian household, which is fabulous. Not everybody does. I've seen a lot of your videos. For those of people, for those of people who are listening, and have maybe not seen your videos yet, you and your dad go around to different college campuses, and you obviously speak to kids, well, young adults, I should say, and really everybody, which is just so cool. So thank you for all you do.
Appreciate it. Yeah, that's really what we do. We're pastors of a church. He's a senior. I'm associate. I also have a brother who's a youth pastor at the church too. So that's our main work. But he started this 42 years ago, and we're writing a book together now on it and what's going on there. We got a bunch of podcasts coming up, and then a big university tour list. So we're trying to figure out which schools to really secure and nail down, and which not to. And so it's been fun.
I'll give you a recommendation after we record. But let's get down to business. So obviously, I kind of had started to lean into the question before I had to give you a compliment. So sorry I had to put that out there. But how did your walk with faith start? Faith start with God because obviously everybody in a Christian household. I was raised in a Christian household, but it's really your choice. Do you want to keep going to church when you're in college? Do you want to wake up at 10 a.m.? Do you want to put Christian music on, or do you want to put more rap music on? That all becomes a choice at some point. So even though you've grown up in a Christian household, how has faith just been at the center of your life since a young age?
Well, I love when an atheist says, "Oh, you just grew up in a Christian household. That's why you're a Christian." Little does that atheist know that over 75% of pastors' kids turn away from the faith. So they don't just grow up in a Christian household, but I'm also a pastor's kid. And so I'm fairly rare, actually, for one pastor's kid to be a Christian. So for me, growing up in a Christian household, especially as a PK, I was homeschooled at first. And before I went into public school, I thought everybody in the world was Christian, really. And my parents didn't tell me that. I just thought it. And and I didn't care what they said. I was like, no, no, everybody's Christian. I'm basically around all Christians my whole life. But then I went to public school and I started getting made fun of for being a pastor's kid and having a pastor for a dad. And that kind of chiding, that type of poking at a level of persecution almost made me lose my faith. I definitely retained it. So that was the first level of doubt that came when I was very young. I was only seventh, eighth, ninth grade. Then going into college, even though I went to a Christian college, there was another hurdle to jump. And a lot of my friends had been Mormons, and a lot of people around me said, obviously, Mormons are brainwashed, for example. Well, I said, well, if Mormons are brainwashed, how do I know I'm not brainwashed? And so I just really start working through the intellectual questions, and that's kind of what has led me to do with my dad what I do today. And so working through those really secured my faith in a new kind of way that made it stronger than ever. And that's why I really encourage college students or younger or way older that everybody needs to work through the faith themselves and have a healthy devotional life to go alongside of that and answering those tough questions in order to have a strong faith with the God of the universe.
For sure, no doubt about it. And that is just so important at this young age. And I asked a few of my friends, I gave my trustworthy bubble and told them that you were coming on. So I didn't tell the entire world, but I told a few people. And one of them said, "Tips is something that I'm, always struggling with, maybe to find a Christian boyfriend or girlfriend. Or on top of that, to just have a good relationship through Christ because there's so many distractions, not just in college, but you could be a 20-year-old working a blue collar job. There's distractions at a young age being a Christian. So you got any good input on that to add?
Yeah, sorry. Phrase the first part of the question.
Yeah,
Rephrase that.
so yeah, sorry. Relationships when it comes to kind of making Christians in a relationship setting. I think that can be tough at times at a young age.
Yes. So whether that's romantic or platonic, you're saying. Oh yeah,
Let's say romantic. I'd say more romantic.
whether it's good or bad.
Like, as in good, as in like, how can people find that partner through God at a young age? Let me word it that way. Sorry
Yeah.
for the confusion there.
No. Part of the
I'm
confusion. I
not
was on
trying to go. I'm not trying to go back to the sixth grade talk that they have in school. So don't worry about that. But
a.
about finding, that good soulmate. So sorry for the misconfusion on that.
No. I got the question. I was on a podcast last night, and I got the question about equally yoked, unequally yoked. Can you date a non-believer, or does it have to be a believer? How about marriage? So no, all those questions are very relevant, and the one you're asking is a really important one. How do you go about finding that type of soulmate? Well, one, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Way too often do I see these Christians who put so much pressure on themselves. They're in the Christian college circle. There's something called Ring by Spring, where you're supposed to get engaged by the spring of your senior year in order to get married right out of college. And unfortunately, the divorce rate is pretty high for Christians who do that. So that type of pressure is unhealthy. You can't chase after a spouse, and then that leads to the second point and turn into a perfectionistic thing where that spouse has to be perfect. So we see these studies where people will walk into a room, especially the men, and they'll automatically just start to try and date those girls who are attractive. Well, the Christian walk says what? I mean, what about man looking at the heart versus God looking at the heart? Obviously, man doesn't look at the heart. Man looks at the outward things. You think of King David, for example. Everything in Scripture talks about you better look at the heart first. And so, yes, we want to be attracted to the person, hopefully, but that's not the end all and be all. I mean, look at arranged marriages. They last the longest. Well, most of those marriages probably, well, at least one of the spouses is not attracted to the other. So you got to be careful in the perfectionistic piece too. But then thirdly, just get to know as many Christians as possible, just at a friendship level, and then see what are their goals in life, what are they really after, what are their hobbies, where does faith come into play, and then ask them out and try and move into a dating place. And then once you get into that dating place, be careful about puppy love. I had a seminary professor ask me when I first started dating my wife, actually, hey, are you out of the puppy love phase yet? And I said, no, it's great. He said, you want to get out of that as quickly as possible. And basically his point was, if you're going to take this relationship seriously and potentially marry this girl, you want to really get to know her. And if you're in this puppy love phase where it's all just, the feel good oxytocin and endorphins flowing, you don't really know the person. It's actually more of a selfish thing, where an ego driven thing where it's this person makes me feel this way, who I find to be very attractive. So moving out of there fairly quickly in order to really get to know the person is important in order to find that soulmate.
For sure. I mean, I really appreciate you saying that. I've always felt like that's something that I've heard a lot. So I appreciate you sharing that. I haven't heard that too much because obviously there's not a lot of Christianity things around a young age, but you saying that means a lot, and I'm sure my listeners will appreciate that. And then, kind of two other topics I wanted to discuss. One other one was, what is something that inspires you to keep going out there? Because you have days where you're on a college campus or wherever, could be on the beach even, where people are going to give you a middle finger or something rude like that. And then other days are going to be crying to you, asking you to pray. So, what just inspires you to keep going briefly?
Well, the level of post Christianity in our society right now, that's one of the things that motivates me the most. I'm not in a Christian nation anymore. We aren't living in that Christian nation. In the Bible Belt, you can feel more that way, but even in the Bible Belt, a lot of the cultural Christianity is happening. But I see so much secularization where I'm at, where people do want to give God the middle finger. And so, yes, those who are God's mailmen are the ones who get the middle finger second. So I do get that a good amount in the Northeast. But that's one of the things that motivates me the most. If I was in a very healthy Christian nation, I probably, look at an area of the world right now, parts of Africa or South Korea even, where Christianity is very healthy. I, I would still be just as motivated in one sense to always share my faith. But in another sense, I want to be sharing that faith with non-believers, especially those who are anti-Christianity, anti-Christ. And so for me, that's one thing. Being in a nation where it's moved towards post-Christianity, where people hate the idea of sin or a suffering God, or this idea that I have to give my life over to him and be a disciple. That's another dirty word. And really flesh these things out and say, Well, if I believe in exclusive truth, and you do too, you might define it differently, but you are also definitely, we are all exclusivists, and we all proselytize our own truth, whether we realize it or not. And so for me, I believe that there's the most evidence, experiential, cultural, emotional, and logical evidence behind the Christian faith. So I want to share that. And if I truly believe that I have and that we have, Jacob, you as well, obviously, just as much so, the cure for cancer, well, I hope we're going to crawl across cut glass to give that cure for cancer to somebody who has cancer and they don't even realize they perhaps have it.
For sure. And one last thing, going back on that question briefly, how do you think we get back? Because you mentioned that we're not a Christian nation anymore. How do you think we get back to that?
We get back to that. Partly, it's why it's important we're to be involved in politics, because you look at North Korea, from space, and it's very dark, and so the opportunity to share your faith in North Korea is very difficult. You're going to get snuffed out like that. And so we do want to be involved in politics and work for free speech, work for freedom of expression in different ways, work for the ability to legislate our own morality biblically, because people who are anti-scripture are legislating their own morality in different kinds of ways. So that would be one. We have to have some level of involvement. Now, what that looks like for each person, especially pending on a career path, is going to be different for each Christian. But that's one way. Second way is to grow healthy Christian community. So I don't think we should skip the church house to go repair the White House. I think we need to work on the church house first in order to get to the White House in a healthy way. And so community is going to be very big. Thirdly, justice oriented. Our society, more so now than probably ever, is all about, social movements, and we got to work for justice. Okay, well, what does justice really look like? And do we need something like a judgment day, perhaps, where justice really will win out? Or if there's no judgment day, no eternity out there, then when you say work for justice, I don't really know what you mean by that. First of all, it becomes all relative if there is no God. And secondly, there's really going to be no justice for the vast majority of people once they pass away. So those are three ways. But then the fourth is just being bold individualistically, as the individual. So for you, Jacob, at Purdue, for me at different universities or at a church, it's going to take those kind of awkward discussions with people who don't believe or who are against faith just to see where they're at. And you got to meet with people differently with where they're at. Jesus met with Martha and said, I'm the resurrection and the life, in a very blunt, curt way. But then he cried with Mary. And so he's meeting people differently. Nicodemus, John chapter 3, he's saying boldly to him, you must be born again. And Nicodemus is like, what in the world are you talking about? But then John chapter 4, he's saying to the one at the well, he's meeting her where she's at and entering into her pain first, but then also calling her gently out of her sin. So those are the 4 points. Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that right there. And then kind of my last thing I wanted to ask you about is someone's going to listen to this interview and they're going to hear about relationships. They're going to hear about everything we've discussed so far up to this point in the last 15, 20 minutes. But they're going to still say, I don't know where to start. And I probably maybe should have started with this question. But again, if you start with something, somebody might not understand it. After they listen 15 minutes in the interview, they might be more interested. So I wanted to close with this. What are 3 or 4 things people should do if they're interested in the Christian faith? Really, any faith. They could be interested in being a Muslim even. What are 4 resources or starting points, would you say briefly, that you would have for that person?
Check out the Bible. And I'm going to start somewhere where probably you haven't heard before from somebody. But if you're a college student, I would go right to the book of Ecclesiastes. Because Ecclesiastes is the book that a lot of the existential philosophers who you're going to be reading at any major university across the U.S. were really drawing a lot of those principles out of the book of Ecclesiastes. So what does ultimately life, if it's meaningless, all is meaningless, the author of Ecclesiastes says, life under the sun is meaningless. That means if there is no God, if there is no eternity, then life is ultimately meaningless. And so start with that, because in college, you really want to struggle and wrestle with, well, what is the meaning of my life? And is there meaning outside of even my own life, like objective meaning? Or is it all just subjective and it's all just a person's taste? So if you want to kill somebody, that's subjective. It's not inherently horrible. Or if you want to serve them lunch because they're a homeless person, that's not objectively great or good. It's just, okay, good for you. That's kind of what culture says to do. Cool. So then I would move to the Gospels, start with the Gospel of John, actually. You can start with Matthew, but John kind of gives Jesus in the most simple way where even a 10-year-old can understand who Jesus is, and then work your way through the Gospels and then Paul's epistles, for example. And you'll get this incredible historical claim by a character who lives a perfect life, who, oh, by the way, every religion talks about Jesus Christ in a positive way. No other historical figure is talked about in every religion in such a kind of way. Not even is a religious figure broached in every religion like Jesus. Jesus has had more influence on our world than any other historical figure, hands down. Buddha would be second, but way behind Jesus. So I would go there. Then I would move to just do a little brief survey of comparative religions. Get a few good books on comparative religions, work through it yourself, and see where the evidence really lands on what to believe in. I would get a good comparative religious textbook on atheism as well. Atheism is a form of religion, and atheists do not like to look at their own worldview. They just like to poke holes in yours. But if you turn the lens back on them, where they truly have to gaze at themselves, they don't know up from down, about 99% of them. And that 1% that claim that they do, even they have a very tough time explaining what they really believe. So those are a few.
Appreciate you sharing that. And then I always like to end with four quick kind of fireball questions. And no, I'm not promoting alcohol or anything like that on my show. But one is, do you think that there's more agnostic there or atheist people out there? Which one would you say?
Apatheists. I think there's more apatheists out there, especially in Europe, but also here in the US, where people just don't really care. But there's an earthquake. There's a subterranean serious rumbling going on right now across university campuses. And don't just look at our work. Look at the work of what's going on with so many college athletes, for example. And now so many thousands and thousands of people are turning to genuinely seek after Christ. Ooh, I don't know what's going on there. I don't think it's just a trend. I don't think it's just something that's kind of catchy. I'm pretty sure it's a little deeper than that. And so there's a lot of apatheism, though. Yes, you could call it agnosticism. So I do not know. Apatheism, I do know there's definitely no God. Or sorry, atheism. I do know there is no God. Apatheism, though, is still there's a lot of college students who just wake up and tie their shoes in the morning and then go to class and say, "Oh, I don't really care." So there's more of them, I would say, than either of the other camps.
Appreciate you mentioning that there as well. That the European example and everything. And then two last ones. What are you most looking forward to in 2025? You briefly kind of mentioned that you're working on a book and going on a speaking trip. And then the last one, what is your favorite season?
Oh, those are two good ones, Jacob. Those are the toughest questions you've asked in our time together today. First one, I'm looking forward just to being around family a lot more. I have three little daughters, seeing continue to see how they grow and mature, especially in processing their own faith differently. And then, yeah, more and more people coming to know Christ, not just through me and my dad, but through other people, whatever means necessary, and seeing how their emotional lives and intellectual lives change completely. So those are, yeah, two biggest there. And then favorite season, I'm going to go winter. They're all very close. It's very close, but snow is so magical for me. And I think when I really see beauty in a snowfall and a snowstorm, that's evidence for a creator for me, and that's God.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you joining the show today, Stuart. We hope to see you or in Indiana or the Midwest this upcoming year. Is there anything else you have to say?
Man, just thank you for your great work. Way to get these discussions going and get people thinking, spiritually seeking. It's fantastic. Keep it up, Jacob.